All right, we got to talk about the Ducks. No, not that duck. Yeah, that duck. It's time for another prediction video. I know stuff. Oh yeah, good morning, that is Uncle Lou here. That's right, it is me, Lou Stradamus, live on LouTube for you. Thanks for watching. It's time to do the Oregon Ducks 2025 college football preview and game-by-game prediction. As you can see, I've got the schedule pulled up on the screen right here. We are going to go through it game by game. I'll give you a winner and a loser for every single week. Last year, I picked Oregon to go 12-0. They were the only team I picked to go 12-0. And ended up, they were the only team that went 12-0. So I nailed Oregon last season. Let's see how I can do this year. Speaking of last season, of course, Oregon had a great season right up until they didn't. Their first year in the Big Ten last year really couldn't have gone any better in terms of the regular season. They were undefeated, like I mentioned, at 12-0. They beat Ohio State at home in one of the best games of the regular season. They beat Michigan on the road. They beat Illinois at home. I mean, that's some quality wins here. They then won the Big Ten championship by beating Penn State 45-37 in what ended up being a really good game. I think that might be the best game I've seen Penn State play in a long time. Anyway, they lost, doesn't matter. This is an Oregon video. And then, of course, there was sort of the debacle at the Rose Bowl. They just ran up against a red-hot Ohio State team, and Ohio State sort of blew them out of the building in the first half. That game was over by halftime, by the first quarter, you could argue. That it's Oregon just not ready for what Ohio State had for them on that day. And the season ended a little disappointingly after the run they had in the regular season and capturing the Big Ten title to not even win a single playoff game. Pretty disappointing for the Oregon fans, but they recruited at an extremely high level. They used the portal really well. Dan Lanning has proven to be an excellent head coach. They've got a great staff, and they're poised for another really good run, I think, in 2025. Can they repeat the success of last year's regular season? Can they go 12-0 in back-to-back years? I'm going to be honest. Probably not. It's hard for anybody to go 12-0 anymore with this expanded SEC and Big Ten schedules that people are playing. It's extremely hard to go undefeated. And Oregon's got a lot of new faces in a lot of new places too. That rhymes. You can always count on Lou. That's what I do. Okay, let's get serious for a second here and actually talk about Oregon. For 2025. Mentioned the undefeated run in the Big Ten, their first year in the Big Ten last year, crashed back down to earth with that loss in the playoffs. But what would they look like this year? Well, they're going to have a new quarterback. We know that, right? They've been using the portal to get quarterbacks. Not the case now. They have got Dante Moore. Well, kind of the case. They got Dante Moore out of the portal two portals ago. He was out of high school. Everybody wanted this kid out of high school. He was actually committed to Oregon, ended up flipping and signing with UCLA. Played some as a true freshman at UCLA in 2023, but then transferred out when Chip Kelly quit to go to Ohio State. He transferred out to Oregon, but he didn't play last year. He hardly played last year. He redshirted. So kind of a reset here for Dante Moore heading into 2025. Again, the talent is undeniable, but we haven't seen him play really at all since that 2023 season, and we haven't really seen him play at Oregon, period. This would be kind of a first-year starter there at Oregon. Now, Oregon's always got talent offensively. There's no doubt about it. They did bring in a running back through the portal, probably the best running back in the portal. They've got a guy had 1,400 yards last year. What was his name? Mekhi Hughes, I believe it was, out of Tulane. Mekhi Hughes out of Tulane, 1,400 yards, 15 touchdowns. Widely considered to be the best running back available in this year's portal class. They bring him in. Not such great news at wide receiver. Evan Stewart, who was expected to be sort of their primary number one go-to wide receiver this season, not expected to play in 2025 after an off-season injury. That's going to put a lot of pressure, I think, on freshman Dakorien Moore. Again, this is a guy that was very highly rated, recruited, everybody wanted, talent through the roof, potential undeniable, possible first-round NFL pick down the road. We've never seen them do anything at all at the college level. So you got a new quarterback, a new go-to wide receiver, and a new starting running back. What about the offensive line? 4 new offensive line starters. 4 out of the 5 offensive linemen are going to be new starters. They're replacing 4 from last year. So just a ton of new pieces. Now, like I said, they've recruited well. So they've got talented running backs. They've got talented wide receivers. They've got talented offensive linemen. And Dante Moore is talented, no doubt about it. But we have never seen this group of players play a football game together. It's going to be a lot of new for Oregon offensively. That could matter, especially early in the season. In general, in college football, it takes the offenses a little bit longer to get rolling than it does the defenses. And in the case of Oregon, I think that could definitely be the case in 2025. It could be a few weeks really before Oregon hits their stride. So as you look at the schedule over there, and we're going to talk about it in a second, we'll see if that could be a problem for Oregon early on. Now, defensively, again, because they recruit at such an elite level, used the portal well, just a ton of talent there. They develop their players. They're going to lose a lot of players every single year to the NFL draft, and that was the case. That was the case last year. They lost 3 really good players off of last year's team. Now they've got a lot of talent and a lot of experience coming back. Linebacker position looks pretty good this year. Here's a name you'll remember. Uiagalelei. Yeah, that's right. The Uiagalelei, the ukulele. DJ Ukulele's brother, last year's Florida State quarterback by way of Oregon State, and before that, Clemson. You know the ukulele. Anyway, his brother is a linebacker at Oregon. Mateo had a good season last year, expected to improve upon that in 2025. A really good player. And alongside him, Tiatum Tuioti. Yeah, that's right. I don't know what has Oregon just went out and signed every player from Gilligan's Island. I don't know what's going on with some of these guys. Uiagalelei, T-item to a toady. Look, I don't name these people. I can't be expected to pronounce their names. A roster full of Gilligan's Island people here. They also have Bear Alexander. How about that name, right? Again, a very highly rated and recruited kid out of high school, a 5-star defensive tackle. In fact, I think he was the #1 defensive tackle in his class out of high school. Signs with Georgia. Plays a significant amount as a true freshman, which is not easy to do at the University of Georgia, but still decides to transfer out, lands at Southern Cal. Didn't work out there for him. Why he decided to go there is beyond me. Southern Cal and Lincoln Riley couldn't give 2 hoots or a country holler about anything that happens on the defensive side of the ball. That's been painfully obvious if you followed Lincoln Riley for the last 9 years when he's fielded an absolute garbage can defense 100% of the time. But he did. He went there, didn't like it. Now he's at Oregon. I think Dan Lanning, look, if anybody can get the most out of Bear Alexander and sort of get him to focus on football, because again, the talent and the potential is undeniable. If anybody can bring that out of him, Dan Lanning can. We'll see. But you got Bear Alexander, again, Maury Washington, Devin Jackson. You've got players here at all 3 levels on Oregon defensively that are going to be playing in the NFL one day. But a lot of them are new. They haven't done it at Oregon yet. So, again, a fair amount of question marks on the defensive side of the ball. Oregon traditionally is, going back especially pre-Dan Lanning, has always been known as more of an offensive team. They go for 2 for no reason all the time. You look at some of the quarterbacks and sort of the fast-paced offenses that they really revolutionized about 15 years ago, Oregon did. This season, I think they're going to have to rely on their defense, especially early in the season. Dan Lanning, a defensive-minded guy, so it's not really a surprise that Oregon defensively has kind of caught up to Oregon offensively. They've done really well, particularly along the lines of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, which historically was sort of a weak point for Oregon. They're very well positioned, Oregon is. There's a handful of sort of head coaches right now that it feels like it's not a question of like, is this guy going to win a natty, but more like, when are they going to win a natty? You know, Dan Lanning, Steve Sarkisian, for sure. I would put those 2 at the top of the list, maybe to a lesser degree, Kalen DeBoer. But Dan Lanning has positioned Oregon in a place where it's hard to imagine them having any kind of disastrous season. Or maybe a better way to put it is 9-3 and missing the playoffs has become disaster for Oregon. Like that, it's hard for me to imagine that. Now, I will say this. Oregon does seem right now on paper heading into the season like more of a 9 or a 10 win team than the 12-0 team that we saw last season. And it's just lack of, Dylan Gabriel had a ton of experience, at high level experience at the quarterback position. They had proven talent at the wide receiver and running back positions. There's just a lot more proven commodities last year. I think you felt more comfortable picking Oregon to maybe win the Big Ten or make a run in the playoffs last offseason than maybe you do this offseason. I'm one of these people. I'm giving Dan Lanning a big benefit of the doubt here. I'm just a believer in what he has going on there. So what I mean by a disaster season being 9-3 is I think that's become basically the floor at Oregon. Like Ohio State is this way. Like a bad season at Ohio State is like 9-3, 10-2, and maybe losing the first round of the playoffs. Like that's considered bad. That means you're a really good program. And it feels like Oregon is about at that point now. But admittedly, they do not seem as much of kind of a sure thing as they did to a lot of people, myself included, heading into last offseason. What does Vegas think about Oregon for 2025? And then we're going to get to the predictions here with the schedule. Well, when you look at the win total, again, last year they were 12-0. These are regular season numbers we're talking about here. Their expected win total is 10.5. That's really high. I don't think anybody in the country has an expected win total higher than that. There's only a handful of teams. No SEC teams have a 10.5 win total. There's 3 or 4 that have a 9.5 win total out of the SEC. I can't think of a team right now that has a higher expected win total than 10.5. That's where Oregon sits, 10.5. So you can see the schedule over here. We're about to go through it. If you had to put $1, this is a betting number for those of you that don't know. So obviously you can't win 10.5 games. People bet on this. So they go, oh, I really like Oregon. They're going to win more than 10.5 games. So they bet over 10.5, or they go, yeah, I think Oregon is going to take a step back, go 9-3. I'm going to bet the under 10.5, whatever, you get it. But look at that schedule. What do you think? Over or under 10.5 wins? It's a high number. That's a high number for any team. What about their odds to win the Big Ten? Can they repeat? Can they go back to back and win the Big Ten? They won it last year, their first year in the Big Ten. Can they do it again? Well, Vegas says probably not. Vegas has them as the third best odds to win the Big Ten behind Ohio State, who has the best odds at plus 190. Penn State right behind them at plus 230. Oregon at plus 330. And then there's a massive drop off after those 3 teams to Michigan at plus 1,000. So Vegas is kind of telling you, at least in their opinion, and people that bet money on these types of things, that Ohio State, Penn State, and Oregon are sort of in a tier by themselves in the Big Ten, and then there's a handful of teams under that, and you can probably figure out who they are. Michigan, Southern Cal, Iowa, maybe you put an Indiana or an Illinois in there, who won, Illinois won 9 games last year. Indiana, of course, won 11, again, talking regular season here. But Oregon in the mix there with that top 3 of Ohio State, Penn State, and Oregon with a shot at winning the Big Ten again. Would be their second year in a row on that. What about winning it all? Can they win the whole thing? Oregon is Oregon the best program in the history of college football that has not won a national title? That's an interesting question. You start talking about some other programs that are national titleless. I don't know if you can come up with a better overall program than Oregon that is yet to win a national title. Can they do it this year? Well, Vegas says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Vegas says they have the 6th best chance to win a national title in 2025. In order, from number 1 to Oregon would be Texas with the best odds to win it all at plus 500. Georgia right behind that at plus 600. Ohio State tied with Georgia at plus 600. Penn State right behind them at plus 800. Alabama at plus 1,100. That might be a little surprising. Tied with Oregon at plus 1,100. So you've got Alabama and Oregon tied in terms of odds to win a national title at plus 1,100. Just ahead of them, Penn State at plus 800. Ahead of Penn State, Georgia and Ohio State tied at plus 600. And Texas with the best odds at plus 500. So, but I would say, look, if you're in the top 6 or 7 of these odds here to win the Natty, behind Oregon, you've got Clemson. I'd give them a shot to win the Natty. Behind that, you've got Notre Dame. I'd give them a shot to win a Natty. That's probably where I would draw the line. After that is LSU. I think LSU, everything goes right, could probably make the playoffs. I don't see them winning a natty, though, not with Brian Kelly, to be honest. So I think anywhere from Notre Dame up to the top, I think it's got a legitimate shot to win it. That would be Notre Dame, Clemson, Oregon, Alabama, Penn State, Ohio State, Georgia, or Texas. You can let me know what you think about that down below. But anyway, it's time to get to the schedule. We're going to go through it game by game. I'm going to give you a winner and a loser for every single week. Talked about Oregon offensively, how much new you have. New quarterback, new running back, new number one wide receiver, 4 new offensive linemen. Sure would be a great year to start off with Montana State. And guess what? They start off with Montana State. This is great. Now, if you remember last year, if you go back to Oregon's schedule last year, they started off with Idaho. And they did not play well in that game. This was a home game for Oregon. No one watched it because we all just kind of assumed this was going to be a 50-point beatdown. And then you see the score start to scroll across the bottom of your screen, third and fourth quarter, and you're like, what in the world is going on? They beat Idaho 24-14 last year in week 1. I would expect a different performance from Oregon this year. I don't think anybody is going to be picking Montana State to win this game. I actually think Oregon comes out and does not sort of sleepwalk like they did week 1 last year, and Oregon kind of blows them out. They start out 1-0. Now, they do have a Power 4 opponent in week 2, but again, it's a home game for Oregon against Oklahoma State, and it's hard to know, are they catching Oklahoma State at a good time, or are they catching Oklahoma State at a bad time? And what I mean is, Oklahoma State, generally, under Gundy, has been around an 8-win team. And then every once in a while, they'll win 9 or 10 games and kind of compete for the Big 12, right? Last year, they completely bottomed out, which was weird because they were a favorite to win the Big 12 heading into the season. They had 5 returning offensive linemen. They have Ollie Gordon at running back. Why are they considered the best returning running back in college football? And they just completely nosedived. It was one of the worst Oklahoma State seasons that Gundy has had, and he's been there for 122 years. So, is Oregon catching Oklahoma State at a good time? In other words, are they just headed in the wrong direction now under Gundy? Or is Oregon getting ready to catch a pissed off Oklahoma State team who has spent all offseason vowing not to repeat the disaster of last year? I do think this is a tricky game for Oregon here. All those new pieces offensively. They struggled in their first 2 games last year, Oregon did. We talked about the first game last year against Idaho. Their second game was against Boise State. Now, Boise State, we know now, ended up being a really good team last year. They made the playoffs, the best of the Power 5 anyway. And Oregon was kind of lucky to escape that game. They beat them 37-34, a 3-point win, again, at home against Boise State last year. This year, Oklahoma State comes to town. I think this is a potential sort of loss that you don't see coming for Oregon. Now, I'm going to give Oregon the win here. I just think they're too talented to drop this game at home to Oklahoma State. But this is a game, if you're looking for hidden losses for Oregon this year, there's a more than 0% chance that Oregon loses that game. 5-10% chance. We all have been watching college football a long time. You see weird things happen. It's just, this game gives me, if I was Oregon, this game would make me nervous, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But I've got Oregon starting 2-0. Then you have a conference game on the road at Northwestern, and outside of the fact that it's a road game, I can't think of any reason why Oregon would not win this game. I've got them at 3-0. Northwestern severely outmatched from a talent perspective and a coaching perspective in that game. Then an in-state rivalry game against Oregon State. I'm going to say the same thing about Oregon State I said last year. I feel bad for them. They're like the orphan that didn't get picked, them in Washington State. The Pac-12 imploded. Big 10 took half. Big 12 took half. Oregon State, Washington State sitting around like, hey, what's the deal here? They're like Kevin from Home Alone. It's just everybody gets where they're going, and then they're like, oh, shit. We forgot about Oregon State and Washington State. Oh, well, I guess they're in the Pac-2 or whatever. Pac-12 has rebounded. It'll be back next year. But anyway, Oregon's not going to lose this game. Again, it's at home. The schedule sets up great here. First month of the season, first 4 games anyway for Oregon, right? A lot of new pieces on offense. Started slow last year. Could take a while for the offense to get going this year. So you look at the first 4 games and you say, well, where's the road game? The road game might be the easiest opponent you have. I mean, Montana State might be better than Northwestern. I'm half kidding. But the 2 sort of tougher games at Power 4 opponents, they're both at home, Oklahoma State and Oregon State. Neither one of them are great. Oregon should be able to win both of those games. Oregon should start 4-0. But then they got to go on the road a long way all the way across the country to Happy Valley and take on what I think might be the best team in the country, the Penn State Nittany Lions. Now, Penn State's biggest opponent in 2025 is going to be the reputation of the last 10 years, not being able to win the big game. James Franklin and his record against top 10 opponents, right? Oh, well, they go 10-2 every year, but they lose to the two best teams they play. Fair. That's fair. That happens most years. It's also true that in most years, those two losses are to two top 5 teams. Forever they were behind Ohio State and Michigan, while Ohio State and Michigan were busy finishing in the top 5 every year. Last year, they lost to Ohio State and Oregon in the Big Ten championship game, 2 top 5 teams. I mean, so it's not like these are embarrassing losses, okay? James Franklin's a top 10 coach. There aren't 10 coaches in the country better than James Franklin. But if there's a year where Penn State was going to get it together and win one of these games, it's going to be this year. Everything that is a question or a new or a potential concern for Oregon offensively heading into the season is a check mark in the positive column for Penn State. One of the best returning quarterbacks in football and one of the most experienced in Drew Aller. 2 of the best running backs in all of college football, Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. They always have a great wide receiver. They do lose my buddy Cornbread, but they'll replace him. They killed it in the portal when it comes to wide receiver, which has been their obvious weakness on the offensive side of the ball for what seems like forever. They got the kid from Syracuse who had almost 1,000 yards last year. If there was ever a year where Penn State was going to kind of, shut the haters up about not being able to win the big game, it would be this year. Can they do it? Yes, they can. They beat Oregon. I think Oregon goes on the road to Penn State here and loses at Happy Valley. Oregon's first regular season loss since joining the Big Ten and their first loss of the season. Then you have a bye week to sort of regroup, circle the wagons, so to speak, too, before you host Indiana, which could be a really big game. Indiana, of course, one of the surprises of last season under first-year head coach Cignetti, who is back again at Indiana. They went 11-1 and made the playoffs in the toughest conference in football, the Big Ten. The best conference in football last year was the Big Ten. Don't let anybody tell you different. And Indiana went 11-1, and they deserved to be in the playoffs. Now, they got beat, but they deserved. Losing isn't an indication you didn't deserve to be there. Half the teams that play have to lose. So Indiana deserved to be there, but they did get beat. But 11-1. Now, the question with Indiana, same question I have every time a team sort of comes out of nowhere and has a really good season. Is this an indication of where Indiana is headed as a program under Kirk Cignetti? Or is this a Milli Vanilli situation, a one-hit wonder, a one-and-done? More times than not, it ends up being a one-and-done situation. Just think back in your head teams that have made the playoffs one time and then try to think what happened to them since then. Michigan State, ring a bell? They made the playoffs one time. Where have they been since? TCU made the playoffs, lost by 60 or whatever it was to Georgia. I haven't heard from them since. Is that what's going to happen to Indiana? Or is Indiana going to turn into sort of a perennial contender within the Big Ten? I don't know the answer to that question. Here's what I do know. They've got to play on the road at Oregon. And more times than not, it does end up being a one-hit wonder. I'm taking Oregon at home to beat Indiana. You got to go on the road and play Rutgers. I like Schiano and what he's got going on at Rutgers. It's kind of he seems like a blue-collar guy. Rutgers seems like a blue-collar type of team and program. They're a tough, sort of nitty-gritty team. They just don't have any talent there. I mean, you can be the greatest coach in the world. You've got to have the Jimmies and the Joes. And when it comes to Rutgers and Oregon, Rutgers roster just doesn't stand up. Now, it is a road game, a long one, clear across the country, sandwiched between 2 pretty tough home games. So if you're looking for trap game situations, this at Rutgers game, to me, screams trap game here. You've got Indiana, who could be ranked, and then they've got Wisconsin coming in, which won't be ranked because their schedule is brutal. But it feels like Wisconsin's probably going to win a game in October. You've seen Wisconsin's schedule? Please tell me you have. I don't know why I'm even doing this in the middle of in the middle of an Oregon. I can't talk about Wisconsin without talking about this though. Look at Wisconsin's schedule right here in the month of November, right here. This is unfair. At Michigan, home against Iowa, home against Ohio State, at Oregon. That's completely unfair. There's nothing fair about that. But Wisconsin might win one of those games. Which one will it be? Crapshoot. I don't know. Anyway, back to the Oregon schedule, since that is the point of this video. I do think you win on the road at Rutgers. I also think you beat Wisconsin at home. So I think you win all 3 of those games between your 2 bye weeks. However, there is a possibility they drop one of those. I can't make up my mind which one it might be, so I've got them winning all 3. Then they have a bye week, and then they have to travel to take on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Now, this is a very interesting game here. If Iowa can come up with any offense at all, I think they can beat Oregon. In fact, I think they are going to beat Oregon. I think Oregon goes on the road to Iowa and loses. Iowa, every single year, consistently has one of the best defenses, not just in the Big Ten, but in the country. The great special teams. Offense has sort of been the undoing of Iowa, going back for what seems like forever. Now, last year, they finally changed it up. They brought in a new offensive coordinator and a new offensive system. It is hard to get results from a change that drastic in the first year. With that being said, I do think their offense looked better at times last year than at any point in basically the decade prior to that. If they can continue with that, and sort of year 2 is the year that they make the big jump offensively, and look, this is a lot of ifs and buts, and this has to happen, and they need this guy to work out, and that guy's got to be good, and I get it. But this is college football. Weird things happen. Iowa's very well coached. They're not going to beat themselves. You're going to have to go in there and win that game. They're not going to lose it. That I can guarantee you that. I think Iowa pulls it out at home. I told you when I looked at this schedule and looked at Oregon and what they lost and what's coming back and everything, it feels like more of a 9 or a 10 win season than it does like last year's 12-0 run. I've got them dropping a second game here. Now, keep in mind, everyone's goal should be to get into the playoffs. If along the way you win your conference, great. Great. But look at what happened last year. Oregon won the Big Ten, got to sit at home, didn't have to play that first week, right? And then what happened? You got destroyed by a 10-2 Ohio State team. Oregon could be that team this year. I think Oregon will get better. I think they will build towards the end of the season. That offense will get better as the season goes along. But I do think they lose here on the road at Iowa. That's their second loss. They're going to beat Minnesota. They'll beat Southern Cal at home. The defense optional there for Lincoln Riley. Guy's been a head coach 9 years. Can't even spell defense. It's offensive to me how bad Lincoln Riley is defensively. Yeah. And then now here's another tricky one here. And for those of you that might be banging on your keyboard or drooling onto the screen of your phone right now because Uncle Lou told you were losing at Iowa, fine. Go ahead and mark yourself down with a win at Iowa. But if you do, mark yourself down with a loss at Washington. Bottom line is Uncle Lou thinks you're going 10-2. I think you're losing either at Iowa or at Washington. Now, I think, wouldn't you rather lose at Iowa than Washington? You don't want to lose at Washington, do you? Please tell me, as an Oregon man, you don't want to lose to Washington. So I've got you beating Washington on the road, losing at Iowa, wins against Minnesota and Southern Cal in between there. I've got Oregon at 10-2, and 90% chance you make the playoffs at 10-2. I mean, look, you might still make the Big Ten championship game at 10-2 and win that and get into playoffs the sort of the old-fashioned way. I find it hard to believe that the playoff committee would leave out a 10-2 Oregon team. There were a few 10-2 teams that got left out last year and a bunch of 9-3 teams that got left out last year. I do not think a 10-2 Oregon with this schedule would end up getting left out of the playoffs. We'll see. But I've got Oregon at 10-2, so a little bit of a step back from last season. But again, especially in Oregon's case, Oregon as a program has done it all except win a national title. So the good news with a 12-team playoff, there is more than one path to take now over the course of a season to get to that national championship. We saw Ohio State take one of those paths last year, which was 10-2. Don't even play for your conference championship game. Get hot in the postseason and win it all. Maybe that ends up being Oregon this season, but I've got them at 10-2. Their second year in the Big Ten. 2025 Oregon Ducks 10-2. All right, let me know down below how stupid I am. Have a good morning.